this is not hyperbole. I believe this with all my heart. Other than the Jackie Robinson story, this is the greatest American baseball story there is.
What's the greatest baseball movie that is yet to be made?
That would be Brewer's Boys. So what happened is when Chasing 3000 came out, it was about the same time that Facebook came on the scene. And people would reach out to my brother or me, hey, are you the Steve Mikita or Bill Mikita for this movie? One morning, I woke up and someone had sent me a note, a message saying, hey, I saw your movie last night. I really loved it. And I said, thank you, send me a friend request. And he did. And then he said, I have a great idea for a movie. As you know, some people do, some people don't. Mostly, it doesn't work out that way. But he sent me his phone number, so I call him, and he said, I played on the great. I have another idea for a baseball movie. He said I played on the greatest high school baseball team of all time. Really? Yeah.
That's what they all say. Yeah.
He said we played. We won the L.A. Municipal League in 1965 during the Watts riots. I said, the city's burning around you, yeah, and you played a baseball game, yeah. I'm in already.
Wow, interesting. Okay.
And I just was interested. I said, so just out of curiosity, who was on your team? And he said, well, there was Bob Watson, Bobby Tolan, Enos Cabell, Doc Ellis. I said, whoa, time out. You're telling me all these future major leaguers were on your team? Yeah. And Dennis Gilbert. Dennis Gilbert, you mean the Dennis Gilbert who just tried to buy the Los Angeles Dodgers Dennis Gilbert? Yeah. Short white guy. Yeah. So you were an integrated team. Yeah. And we had this really inspirational coach. His name was Chet Brewer. And he kept us out of trouble, and he was a mentor to all of us. And he was a former pitcher in the Negro Leagues. Wow. I said, that's incredible. Oh, and also, by the way, our 9-year-old bat boy was Eddie Murray. I said, you mean the greatest switch-hitting first baseman of all time? Yeah. He was your bat boy? Yeah. I mean, I'm blown away. Why haven't I ever heard of your team? So I did my homework. I find out all these guys lived in South Central Los Angeles, and I optioned the story. And the story just kept getting bigger. We met all these former pro ball players, many of them, and it was an incredible story. And they told us how much Chet Brewer meant to them. But as I had one writer friend who said this story keeps writing itself. So they told me one day they came to practice, and this tall, lanky gentleman was teaching Doc Ellis how to throw a curveball. It was Satchel Paige. And then I asked him, did you have a team that you had trouble beating? Yeah. Who was their pitcher? Raleigh Fingers. Another Hall of Famer. What? And they said there was this 24-year-old scout from the Dodgers. He was at all of our games. Tommy. Tommy Lasorda? Yeah, Tommy Lasorda. He was at all your games. Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. And then they told me about Chet Brewer, and he was a pitcher in the Negro Leagues. And unfortunately, by that time, he was too old by the time the race barrier was broken by Jackie Robinson. So that time passed him by. He wasn't able to play in the major leagues. But he had this eye for talent and this ability to coach. The Chet Brewer coached 24 future major league ball players. And my theory is, I've told people, this was right before the influx of all the great Latin players. Anyone who was anyone came out of Southern California, right here in LA. it was the nexus of the baseball world. It was incredible. All of these great players came out of Los Angeles. And this team had 9 players, high school players, 9 players. They got 9 major league contracts. If you had 2 boys on one team in your city, it would be national news. If you had 2 players on one team, high school team got major league contracts, it would be national news. All 9 players got major league contracts. And Chet Brewer, he kept, they played this game. Even though the watch riots were going on, and not only did Chet Brewer experience racism in its most awful forms, but these young players he somehow guided them through this unscathed by making baseball like this sanctuary for them. And so he was an incredibly inspirational and generous man. I met Tommy Lasorda about 4 years ago, and I introduced myself and I told him about my project. And I got to the point where I said, I'm making a film about Chet Brewer, and he said, I love Chet Brewer. He still remembered Chet and loved, and that's the impact that Chet Brewer had on people. And now that Major League Baseball, I don't know if you know this, they have now recognized all of the records and statistics of the Negro Leagues as major league contracts. And because of that, Chet Brewer now has some major league records.
Oh, wow.
And one of my goals, not only to tell this story, I believe it to be, and this is not hyperbole, I believe this with all my heart, other than the Jackie Robinson story, this is the greatest American baseball story there is. And I would love to get Chet Brewer into the Hall of Fame with the notoriety that this movie would bring him. And he was the greatest baseball guy, the greatest baseball man no one knows about. And these players who are now in their 70s, they still remain close. It's fascinating. They come together and it's just like it was 50 years ago for them. They laugh and they joke. They have their own nicknames for each other, and they all stayed very close. They were all very successful. And quite a few of them have passed away in the last few years, which is kind of sad. But this story is another story that has to be made. It's a story that has to be told. And so we're looking to get it made.
And this all came from someone seeing Chasing 3000.
Correct.
And contacting you, and then you have this Facebook
Correct.
sort of friendship, and so...
Yeah, and then just kind of the symbiotic relationship I have with Chasing 3000, with maybe this, with my own life somehow. The team the team that won, they were known as the Little Pirates. They were associated with the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Oh.
And so there's somehow almost a connection, because one of the players played with Doc Ellis, actually played with Roberto Clemente, and so it's almost a prequel to the Clemente story. But it's a great story. It is a baseball story, but it is also a great story of overcoming challenges and overcoming prejudice, and just the kind of man that Chet Brewer was.
And how has writing this screenplay been different than writing Chasing 3000?
I'm a better writer. I think I know, after making Chasing 3000, what kind of elements needed to be present in the story to make it a good story, to make it a good baseball story, and to also to make it where it it wasn't going to be too expensive. And so, believe it or not, sometimes you have to think of those kinds of issues when you write a screenplay. And I think my experience with Chasing 3000 helped me to become a better writer and to craft the story in a way that would touch the audience.
I know off camera we just talked briefly about like you'll see something or then it requires a crane shot back in the day, and why would a screenwriter write that shot into the film when it's going to cost so much of the budget? But did you worry about making it big enough? You said last time with Chasing 3000, they said, I like the movie, I like the brother relationship.
This story is big enough because it's centered around the time of the Watts riots. So this incredible upheaval, right? For a 4 or 5 day period in LA is the setting of all things a baseball game and a baseball tournament. So it really gives this a much bigger element to the story.
So you feel that that's big enough, obviously.
Oh yes.
Then when you were told with Chasing 3000,
yes.
You need to make it bigger.
Yeah, because not only that, you have at least 6 or 7 not only major leaguers but Hall of Fame players who were associated with this team, and so or were around this team. And so with that, if I had to pitch it, it would be Remember the Titans with a baseball theme. A true story about players, some African American, some Caucasian, who came together with this incredibly inspirational coach and man during a turbulent time. People think today is turbulent. The 60s and were extremely turbulent. And the violence and amount of death and
Kent State.
Yes, and the property damage done during the Watts riots was incredible, and so it just adds, that's the setting to this story. It gives it an emotional lift that most stories wouldn't have.
Sure. How did you go about optioning the story?
I just was able to option it from the Dan Pierce, who pitched me the story, and then we were able to talk to all the other players, the men who were part of this team. They were all behind it. They all want to see the movie made, and so it was. There was not one person who pushed back on it, and largely because it was about Chet Brewer. They didn't see it. They didn't see it as about themselves. They saw it. It was their love of Chet Brewer.
Sure. And what type of research did you do once you said, I want to commit time to this?
Well, I spent a lot of time. I started to interview the players who are now, Dennis Gilbert is one of the most successful baseball agents in baseball, and one of the biggest baseball men in all of baseball. Next time you watch a Dodgers game, right behind the home plate on the first row, there's a good-looking guy with dark hair and sunglasses. That's Dennis Gilbert, and he and Bobby Tolan and Bob Watson and others were very gracious and shared with me then stories that happened to them, and that I was able to incorporate into the screenplay.
Yeah, we have a quote here from Dennis Gilbert, I believe. He said about Chet Brewer, he could be the most respected person I've ever met in my life. Everybody loved him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And Dennis Gilbert always tells me everyone called him Mr. Brewer. Everyone in the community. In fact, that was actually my working title, was Mr. Brewer. And so, you know, titles of movies can change, but he was that kind of man. And I've heard stories now from other people. He's almost a Roberto Clemente-like individual. His character, he was such a great man. How he influenced others outside of, you know, baseball. His generosity, his kindness, and he was incredible individual. So the story is just an incredible story based on the number of players that this area of LA generated.
Why is this story worth fighting for?
It would be because, again, it's a story that needs to be told. We live in a very divided time. It's painful to see how divided we are as a nation, and for people to reflect that in 1965, it may have been even more turbulent, but during this time, one man was able to make the difference in 9 young men's lives that changed the course of their life and baseball. That's a pretty dramatic story, even if you're not a baseball fan. So.
Did you do these interviews in person?
Yes.
Oh, you did. You actually
Yes.
met face to face.
Yes, yeah. And I had a tape recorder and notes, and I just had a Zoom call with Bobby Tolan and Dennis Gilbert recently, and they told me some things that I still didn't know, and I revised. I added it to the story, what Bob Watts' nickname was, and a couple other things. Well, I didn't know. I mentioned Satchel Paige. There's another great. Some people, I don't know if you've ever heard of Josh Gibson. Josh Gibson was maybe the greatest home run hitter of all time, but he played in the Negro Leagues. They actually called him the Black Babe Ruth. And Chet Brewer and others who played call Babe Ruth the white Josh Gibson,
Okay.
which I love. But there was another catcher named Biz Mackey. I think there's a rapper that.
Biz Marquis?
Yeah,
Okay.
that made a play on that name. But there's a catcher named Biz Mackey, who was some consider the greatest defensive catcher in the Negro Leagues. He lived in South Central Los Angeles, and he would come and to practice as well. So there were 2 Hall of Fame Negro League players who came and were associated with his team. Pretty incredible.
And Ozzie Smith as well?
Yes, they tease Ozzie Smith to this day. Ozzie Smith never made one of Chet Brewer's teams. A Hall of Fame shortstop did not make one of his teams, and they still tease him. And so this team was just incredible. The word is used, maybe overused, but it's truly a remarkable story. And it'll be a great movie.
What are some of the ups and downs you faced currently trying to get this movie made?
Well, like every screenwriter, every filmmaker out there, it has been such a difficult last, for me, 4 years at least. So we had COVID, Then we had the writer's strike. Then we had the actor's strike. Then I had my brother pass away. I lost 4 years of time, and I think a lot of filmmakers did, simply because Hollywood really put on the brakes. And even right now, there are very few things being made. And it is a difficult world out there. I have another project. I have a third project that I'm pitching as a TV series, and even on the TV side, it's starting to open up a little bit, but it's all of us. There's just everyone I think would agree it's been a tough last 3 or 4 years. So we have the money to make the movie, but it's been a stop and start thing of getting distribution and getting it, because every time we started negotiating, well, first, we had COVID, then we were very close 2 years ago, and then the writer's strike hit, and everything went dark for months, for a year after that. And so we're hoping that, everyone is hopeful here in Hollywood that it starts to open up.
Let me see if I understand this. So you have the budget for the film, but you don't have distribution?
Correct. In today's world, you need distribution as well. You need to get a distributor early on to commit to it. And if a studio commits, that would be great, but you need the distributor. And then when we would probably shoot in a state with a big tax rebate, probably in Georgia or Alabama. And a lot of cities in the South, a lot of cities in the Midwest still resemble the 50s and 60s, quite frankly. Whereas South Central Los Angeles looks nothing today like it did in 1965. So where we shoot is going to have to probably be outside of LA. But yes, it wouldn't. You would think, well, why don't you just go shoot the movie and then look for a distributor then, and it's just not. It's just something that the production company is willing to do, and you have to get that distributor up front to be involved, and so that's what we're looking for.
Do you already have the songs? The playlist?
I did. I wrote it with songs.
Okay. You don't have to tell me which ones, but I bet you there's great music
it's
in there.
R&B. It's the 60s R&B songs. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Was that part of the fun for you too? Because I know it seems like music you love to incorporate music.
I love music, and I love to incorporate it.
And it was such a moving force in that time.
It was. And
not that I was around them, but I mean that there was music was so pure. It seems like up to a certain point.
Yeah, and it was, and that industry is completely different, right? Than it was even 10 years ago. So, but that's where we are. We have our budget, we have money, but we're looking for distribution.
And so once you find that, then you'll find the state with the best tax credit.
Correct, and then we can go out to actors. So the way I wrote it, of course, the cast is going to be largely a young cast, young, really African American cast. And so I wrote it that the two main characters would be Chet Brewer and then Dennis Gilbert's father. So two adult. So we'd have two. We need, we'd like to get 2 A-list actors for those parts, and that would really put us over the top.